You're Free to Go is sponsored by Milburn Men's Clothing, where top athletes shop for sharp, tailored style. And whether Mark and I are in the studio or the courtroom, Milburn dresses us for success. Mention YFTG and get 10% off at Milburn Men's Clothing, which has been providing the finest in men's clothing and suits since 1946. Call 651-645-2922 or visit www.milburn.com. Welcome back, everybody, to your favorite podcast, You're Free to Go. Today's going to be a good podcast because we're going to talk about our backgrounds. Mark and I are going to share with you why we went to law school, why we became criminal lawyers, and just kind of how our career started. So it's a little more of a personal episode today. So as I've said before, for the next 45 minutes, you are not free to go. Our clients typically wind up being free to go at the end of their case. But for now, you're with us. And we're going to get right into it with Mark. Why don't you share with our listeners, our viewers, how you wound up becoming a lawyer and why you chose criminal defense?
I still don't know why.
You mean your mom didn't say you have to be a lawyer?
At this point, I'm thinking maybe I should do something else.
Well, you were always a good actor.
Well,
that's what.
No, so what happened is, I went to college, and at the end of my stint in college, the Vietnam War was going on. I'm not that young, obviously. And, there was a draft and there was a lottery in the draft, and my number didn't come up. It got up to a couple of numbers before mine. So I wasn't drafted, which, I was very happy about because I had a couple of buddies from high school who'd been killed in Vietnam. It wasn't my first choice to go. If I'd been drafted, I would have served, obviously.
Of course.
So at the time, I was thinking about my future, and my girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife, wanted to go to law school. She was a heck of a lot smarter than me, and she wanted to go to law school. And I said, you know what? I'll give it a try. Right. I really didn't have any other ambition in life at the time.
Well, I know you played music, right?
Yeah, I played music.
Yeah.
And, I had been in bands and played around, but I knew at that point in time I didn't have the talent to make a career of it.
Right. But if I remember correctly, didn't you play against Billy Joel in that competition?
I was in a battle of the band that his band was in at the time. I'm trying to remember the name of the place. I think it was the Action House in Island Park. I'm not sure. In any event, it was the Hassles was the name of his band. But of course, we all know Billy Joel is a brilliant, genius talent, and I just farted around on the guitar, So in any event,
had you won that competition, your career path might have been very different.
Well, at the time, it wasn't Billy Joel. It was the group that he was in. I mean, he didn't get famous till later. Although interestingly, I saw that they re-released the Hassles had done an album. They re-released the album, and the cover said Billy Joel and the Hassles or something like that.
Really?
Back originally, he wasn't individually famous, but he's a brilliant musician. I've seen him dozens of times over the years. I hear he's no longer performing. He has some kind of...
Yeah, he has something, I think, a brain swelling issue.
It's a shame because he's just marvelous. But anyway, so I decided to go to law school, and we both wound up going to Washington, D.C., I wound up getting into Georgetown. I don't know how. Must have been a mistake in the
No. It's a great school, and you're a very bright man. So.
And I wound up going to law school there. And I had no real direction in law school till my third year, when I got into the criminal justice clinic. Georgetown has always been the leader in clinical education. And they had this criminal justice clinic. I decided to sign up for it, and I got into it, and it was just an amazing eye-opener. First of all, it was being in the courtroom. And even though I was still in law school, the first semester I was in the clinic, I got assigned as a assistant, like an intern, an assistant public defender in Prince George's County in Maryland. And that's when I had my first experience going into court, although I think I may have mentioned that it took a while to get out of the bathroom, and they kept knocking on the door and asking for me, and only made it worse. But eventually I got into court. I don't even remember the cases I handled, although I do remember one time I went to see a client in jail, and this will stick with me the rest of my life. I went to see this guy accused of robbery.
So you're an intern.
I'm technically, I don't know what I was.
Did you pass the bar yet?
No,
Okay.
no.
Yeah.
But I was working as an assistant public defender in the clinical program.
Okay.
Obviously supervised by somebody who really knew what they were doing.
Right.
But I went to interview somebody, and these were all indigent cases, and I went to interview somebody who was arrested for robbery, and I sit there with my notepad, and I'm ready, and this was the first time I actually went to interview a client.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there with my notepad, and my first question is, well, what happened? How did this happen? Because I saw the crime was some kind of robbery. And he said, well, I have to tell you, I'm not the guy that they arrested.
Whoa. Your first case.
And not the guy they arrested? It didn't make any sense to me. I said, so how are you here? He said, I don't know. I'm not the guy they arrested. And it went on like that for like 10 minutes. And I realized this guy's nuts.
Right.
Either he's nuts or I'm nuts. We're both nuts.
You're both nuts.
So I did the smart thing. I got him a psych eval.
Good.
And then I was off the case. So anyway, the long story short, the next semester I worked in the state attorney, it's like the district attorney's office in a different county, in Montgomery County, Maryland. And I just got the bug. And it was criminal cases. And the thing about criminal cases was, and the beauty of leaving law school and then ultimately becoming a district attorney, assistant district attorney, or if you become a public defender, is it's one of the few paths, in fact, it's probably the only path when you leave law school that you get into court.
Right. Immediately.
Immediately.
Literally on your
In
first
fact,
day.
thrown into court.
Yes. Whether you
Deep end of the pool.
whether you like it or not.
Right. And it's just, I love the courtroom. And even till today, as I'm at the sort of towards the fourth quarter of my career, it's not the 2-minute drill yet.
No,
but,
not even close.
You know,
not
in the
even
fourth
close.
quarter, something happens to me when I walk into that courtroom. I don't know about you. And sometimes when I go out of town, and of course I've tried cases in about 30 different jurisdictions, federal jurisdictions, whenever I get to a courtroom, I'll get there early and I'll sit in the courtroom and I try to absorb the vibe,
Yes.
what it is. And I walk around the courtroom and I kind of get the feel of the courtroom. And it just gets to me.
Yeah, I get
can't explain it.
No, I feel that too. And we go to the same courthouses a lot, but whenever we get that other case in a jurisdiction that we haven't been to, for me, it's like the first time I walked into a courthouse. You got the butterflies. You feel a little bit unknown. You're not sure what the rules are there, and it's exciting. It's
It's interesting you say the butterflies because that's called performance anxiety. And I never professionally acted, but I did study acting for 3 or 4 years in New York, and talked to a lot of people who then became well-known actors later on. And they all said the same thing. They were in plays or commercials or whatever, and TV spots. They said before, hitting their mark or going on stage or the camera rolling, they would have that butterflies in their stomach.
Yeah.
And then the minute it starts, it
Right.
goes away.
Yeah, when I say 2 or 3 words, and it's just gone.
Yeah.
You get into the zone, and you're off to the races.
And that performance anxiety, I think, is good because at the end of the day, what it means is you're invested. You really, it's important to you.
Right, and it's part of the drive that makes me, and you as well, always prepare. To be
Right.
fully prepared.
So anyway, I then, as a result of, my clinical experience, I decided this was the path for me to get into the courtroom. And then I became an assistant DA. And then from there, went into private practice. And even though I've done a lot of civil cases, and civil trials, there's still nothing like a criminal case.
Right. Yeah.
And you know what? It's almost like being a trial lawyer, for me, the way I look at it, is to being a lawyer what a surgeon is to being a doctor. It's all on the line. And in a criminal case, it's all on the line. Sometimes your client's future is completely on the
Right.
line, and his family's future
Yeah.
is completely on the line. And that kind of responsibility is very heavy. And, usually when you go to trial in a criminal case, it's because the prosecution has the goods and you're at the disadvantage and you're fighting uphill.
Yeah.
And that challenge is something.
Yeah, it is. It's energizing. We are always going uphill. We're fighting an uphill battle because the government has all the funds and resources necessary to build these cases, and we have to outsmart them, outwork them, be more creative than them, and really claw our way to the top.
Yeah.
So I like that challenge as well. Your analogy was funny about the doctor and the surgeon. They're saving lives, and in a way, we're saving their freedom. So I was early on when I was dating my wife. It was probably the third, fourth week we were dating. We were in a restaurant, and this gentleman comes up to us and says, "Guy, how are you?" He gives me a big hug and everything. And I introduce him to my wife, and he turns to her and he says, "Oh, you're with the greatest guy. He saved my life." And she says, "Oh, how do you guys know each other?" And I immediately said, "Oh, we've been in the community forever. I've known him. We have all these mutual friends." Da, da, da. And when he walked away, I turned to her and I said, "Hey, Lauren, I'm not a heart surgeon. Like when someone you meet says I saved their life, it means they were looking at prison time and I won the case." She's like, "Oh, she will never, ever again ask someone how they know me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because a couple of months ago, I got a call out of the blue from a client I had represented about 10 years before in a drug case. And actually, it was a case where he was acquitted. And he called me to tell me not only how his life had progressed very positively, had a family, had a really good business, was doing really well, was very happy, but to thank me. And when that happened, man, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it made everything worthwhile.
Yeah, and we have those experiences quite often.
Yeah.
It's rare that our clients are repeat offenders. It's very rare, but a lot of times it was such a horrible time in their life, they just want to move on and never think about us or that
Right,
experience
yeah.
ever again. But there are a large percentage of those clients that they really do appreciate but for the hard work we did, their life would have been
Yeah.
much different.
And sometimes,
Yeah.
you develop a relationship if a case goes on for a long
They
time,
do.
because you're there. There's the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, a great organization, and they have a motto. It says "Liberty's Last Champion."
That's right.
And people don't think about it, but we get accused of representing some really, bad people,
Yes.
some really heinous people, some people who are vilified, and probably for good reason in the media. But we're doing what we're doing, not just for them, but occasionally we will get somebody who comes along who really is wrongfully accused or overcharged.
Right.
And something that shouldn't be made a big deal of is being made a big deal
Right.
of. And that's what we're here to do.
Correct. Yeah, the system's a great system, but it's far from perfect.
Oh, no, it ain't perfect.
Right, and we're the ones. You're Free to Go is sponsored by Lang Realty, South Florida's premier residential real estate broker. Whether you're buying, selling, or renting a home or condo, Lang's experienced realtors are standing by ready to help you. Contact one of Lang's top realtors today at 561-703-2427. So my kind of path
Yeah,
is
tell me how you got involved.
a little different, but also somewhat similar. I came from a family of doctors. My dad, my uncle were doctors, small town that I grew up in Daytona Beach. Everyone just always assumed I'd be a doctor. I was born when my dad was at Duke Medical School, and I was born in the Duke Medical Center. So it was literally in my genes and my blood, DNA, to be a doctor. But I knew I never wanted to be a doctor. So I graduated from Tulane, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. And I told my parents, I'm not going to med school. I'm actually going to go to Aspen and take some time off to find myself. They got a little nervous about that.
By the way, I don't know. I saw some routine recently, some comic saying, his daughter said, "I'm going somewhere to find yourself. Find yourself. I find you. You're right here."
Yeah, that's what my parents were afraid of too. Like, you're right here. What are you going to go find? And then I actually got nervous because when I did get to Aspen, the first person I met, they said, "Yeah, I came out here to find myself." That was 12 years ago. The next person I met, "I came here to find myself." That was 14 years ago. So everyone got there and they
Didn't
never
you become
left.
like a ski instructor?
Yeah, I did. I was teaching skiing. I was teaching, the Aspen Club had a indoor tennis during the winter. I taught tennis, and also during the summer taught tennis. So I did it was really fun. I had a great experience there, and I did find myself. They had a small little paper called the Aspen Times, and I happened to be reading it, and it was talking about the first murder trial in many, many years was going on in the local courthouse. And I had a day off from work, and for whatever reason, I just walked down there and I walked in that courtroom, and I wasn't sure who other than the person wearing the robe. I knew they were the judge, but I didn't really understand who everyone else was in the courtroom, who the clerk was, or which one was the prosecutor or defense, but I immediately, that light bulb, that aha moment came to me where I'm like, this is what I want to do. I just knew, instantly, I want to go to law school. So I knew going into it, I wanted to practice criminal law immediately. So I wound up out there taking the LSAT, applying to law school, got into law school. One of the reasons I picked the law school I went to, which was Nova, is because they had a really good trial program like you just discussed they had at Georgetown. And in this program, you had to have certain GPA, you had to get recommendations from professors, you had to have taken certain trial courses, and I qualified. And then you actually apply to the Florida Supreme Court for a certified legal internship, and you get certified. And I was able to work an entire third year in one semester of my third year, full-time, no courses, no classes, full-time as a prosecutor.
Wow.
Yeah, I worked in the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office full-time, got full credit for it. And literally, the first day you're there, they hand you your files. And like you mentioned earlier, and you're just off to the races. It was a cool experience. My supervisor, who has since retired, I said to her, "We have 400 cases at a time. Like, how am I supposed to remember these?" She took the first file and she said, "Read the paper, the police report, like the short police report." We call it a probable cause affidavit or a PCA. And it was this first file had about 3 pages. I read it. She said, "Now I want you to take 5 or 6 words that summarize that, and I want you to write it on the outside of the file." So I think I wrote something like, red hair, stolen gold necklace. And I started doing that with each case. And what happened is it wound up opening my mind to the entire file. So all I saw when I picked up that 1 out of 400 file and I saw red hair, gold necklace, whatever it was, those 5 or 6 words, my brain opened up to
That's
everything
great,
that was in
yeah.
that file.
Yeah,
So it was
keywords.
it was a really important lesson my supervisor taught me on how to remember each file when it was so overwhelming. And then she says, "Okay, you're assigned to Judge Evans." And there were like 6 or 7 other CLIs in this training. And all of them were like, "Oh, thank God I didn't get Judge Evans." And I knew nothing. And I'm like, why are they all so, they're like, "Oh, he's the toughest judge in the courthouse." We were all getting assigned to different judges. Well, at the end of the day, I'm a great lawyer because of Judge Evans. And anytime I see him, he's retired, but I see him in the community, I thank him. I shake his hand because he is one of the many most important reasons I'm a great lawyer.
Well, you know what? Trial by fire is the name of the game. Having a judge who doesn't give you a hard time or isn't tough or isn't demanding, it's not the way to go.
Right.
You want to learn.
Yeah, you don't learn from those judges.
You don't learn. You want to learn, and you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah. So, and he required you to be prepared, and which every judge has a right to do. But so the first day I go in there, my supervisor says, "You're just going to observe today." So this prosecutor's in there talking her case. She had been there about a year and a half. And this judge just reamed her out. She ran out of the courtroom crying.
Oh.
Like, oh boy. All these other CLIs were right. This is the tough judge. Day 2, I'm still observing. A male prosecutor arguing his case. The judge reams him out. He literally runs out crying. So day 3, my supervisor says, "Okay, you're up." I'm freaking. I'm like, I don't want to go before this judge, but I did, and it went really well. And a couple days later, I had my first trial. I think it was maybe my fourth day on the job. I have a trial. In the middle of the trial, the judge says, "Mr. Franzen, you have an emergency phone call." Tells the jury we're gonna have to take a very quick recess. I'm like, okay. I go. As a friend of mine calling me, they know I'm a prosecutor. They say, "Hey, I just got pulled over on 95 for speeding. The cop is doing something. Can I use your name?" I said, "Absolutely not, dude. You cannot use my name at all." So I hang up the phone. I go back and judge, "Okay, everything's okay. Thank you for letting me do that." And we get back to trial. I get home that night. I get on the phone with my friend, and they're cracking up. I'm like, "What's so funny?" They said, "I used your name." Got out of the ticket. So that's how my career started, and it was great. I then, after 4 years as a prosecutor, when, as you know, you handle every case, you start with those small cases, work your way all the way up. And when I retired from the prosecutor's office, or announced my retirement, Florida had a governor, Lawton Chiles, at the time.
I remember, yeah.
Lawton Chiles appointed me to do special prosecutions. So here I am starting my own law firm with no money, right? And I need to start bringing in business. But yet he assigned me to prosecute conflict cases. So if a government employee got arrested, the government couldn't prosecute them for conflict of interest. They would assign it to me. And I got really lucky because I had a good dozen of those cases.
Did you get paid for that?
Yeah, I got paid great. You bill them, and like 5 days later in your mailbox, you got the check. It was so much better than our, you know.
Because people don't realize, prosecutors and public defenders don't make a lot of money.
No, they don't at all.
In fact, when I started in the DA's office in New York, I'm living in Manhattan, I got paid $11,250 in 1975, which was a problem because New York went bankrupt that year, and I started August 11th, I didn't get paid till November.
Oh, wow.
And in the meantime, I'm a single guy, I'm dating. My dates were basically taking them on the subway or the Roosevelt Island tramway.
Going Dutch. You had to go
Really,
Dutch.
It was,
right.
It was pretty pitiful. But even by today's standards, prosecutors don't make much money compared to lawyers and public defenders. Lawyers who go into private practice. I mean, now Wall Street firms, the big laws they call them, they're paying first-year associates $250,000 a year.
And that's on the low end for the, if you graduate.
Then some of firms are offering bonuses and things like that. But good luck. You're going to be sitting in a back room reading transcripts, or you're the 10th person to ever talk to a client.
I know.
And
that's why what you said earlier, this is the greatest job in the world, is a public defender or a prosecutor, because you're in courtroom on day one. The funny thing is, this Judge Evans, when it was maybe my second trial or so, the local TV station was doing a show on a day in the life of a judge, and they picked Judge Evans. So I had an entire DUI trial that was filmed.
Oh, wow.
And my mom came, watched the whole trial, which was exciting for her. I win the trial as a rookie prosecutor. I was actually still a CLI, or intern. I hadn't graduated law school, hadn't passed the bar yet. The lawyer I beat was a very renowned, really accomplished, one of the top criminal defense lawyers. He comes up to my mom afterwards. He was so good. As soon as he graduates, I'm hiring him. I don't want him going to the government. I'm hiring him. He's got a job. Of course, when I did finish law school and I called him, he didn't remember who I was. but to this day, I can always say I beat him, and I wasn't even a law school graduate yet.
That's crazy.
And then that first case I got as a conflict attorney when I left the state was a crazy one too. I get this file, I'm looking at it, and it's got a judge was arrested. I'm like, boy, I've been in front of this judge before. Turned out he had a mental breakdown. He went to Target. He stole a remote control, walked out of the store, stripped naked, got into his Jeep. It was a soft top Jeep that had no top on it, or like a Wrangler, and started driving around town totally naked with his remote control in his hand. The police pull him over. He gets arrested. They couldn't prosecute him because he was a government employee. So I got assigned. That was my first case.
Wait a second. So The charge was driving naked with a remote control.
Stolen remote control. Yes, yeah, that was really funny, and he's really a great judge. But unfortunately had a mental break, and that was,
Yeah.
the case wound up being dropped ultimately. But he retired from the
Did
bench.
he wind up going to jail?
He did not go to jail. He had got some serious mental treatment, got some medication. Everything was fine. Within a month or two, he was stabilized, retired. He was at the tail end of his career anyway. But that was a really fun case as a conflict attorney for the state of Florida. And again, I got paid, so it helped me build my private practice with some income from these conflict cases.
Yeah.
So I really, really enjoyed it. And then our careers just took off,
Yeah.
fortunately.
Yeah. And it's interesting because at the end of the day, we all have been involved, and many defense attorneys and prosecutors have been involved in crazy cases, interesting cases. But sometimes the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, especially in the jails,
Right.
is worth talking about.
Yeah, I
And
know.
I have a
and we've
couple
been in dozens and
Oh
dozens
my
of
God.
jails.
I honestly have to say I hate going to jails.
I know.
And
Even though we know that we can always walk out, I still hate it.
yeah, and visiting a client in segregation, or what they call in the federal system the SHU, Special Housing Unit, and there are many reasons why they get put there. Basically, it's almost like solitary confinement. It could be for their own protection sometimes, or a transgression, violating some rules, or they're violent, whatever the reason is. But going to visit a client in the SHU, first of all, you got to go through all these different steps, getting in, and you're going in different corridors, and you're being taken up elevators and whatnot, and you're taken to a special section, and then you're locked into this room.
That's right.
And
Just
then
you
when
and
you're
that
done, you're waiting. I remember one time I waited 45 minutes
Yes.
to get out. I almost was at the point that I was going to be banging.
Oh, I've done that
the
before.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Where are they? Where's my client? Did you
Where-
forget? Do you remember I'm in here?
yeah, they don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talk about the convoluted, corridors and so forth. They build the jails intentionally that way so people can't figure out, when they're trying to escape. Things are very confusing. Do you go down this hall? Do you go down that hall? Which elevator? So when we go visit, jails are similar, but they're also very different because, they're all have different procedures, different layouts and so forth. And so you go in, they say, okay, Mr. Franson, you can turn right at that elevator, take this one to level 2, then switch over here. It's always so confusing.
Right. Now,
Intentionally.
most of the state jails are pretty much maximum security.
Oh,
because
yeah.
They house anything from a minor infraction to murder cases,
Right, that are
serious cases.
that are awaiting trial.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you wind up going to a state jail, there's no bargain there. It's not club fed. The federal system is different. You start you can have at the lowest level what they call prison camps. Some of them, many of them, have been on military bases.
Yep.
And in some of these prison camps, you could literally walk right off.
Correct. Yeah.
Of
No.
course, you don't want to do that because when you get caught, now you're in maximum. And then there's the low to medium, then the medium level. Then there are the penitentiaries, which I've been to a few, that literally, like Leavenworth and Marion, and of course at one time Alcatraz. And then ultimately there's what they call the Supermax in Colorado, where El Chapo is and Ted Kaczynski was, and that place.
No. That's one I have not visited.
No, I have
don't
not
want to.
visited, nor do I ever want
Don't
to.
want. Yeah.
But it's interesting. But jails, we spend a lot of time in jails
We do.
and seeing clients, and sometimes crazy stuff happens. I remember the first time when I moved down to Florida from New York. I'd been a prosecutor, came down, starting defense work. The first case I had, the local magistrate assigned me, pointed me to a case. And I'm representing a fellow, and I go to visit him. And at the time, in Fort Lauderdale, they were keeping some of their federal prisoners at the Lauderhill City Jail.
Yeah. They may still do that. I think.
I don't know if they do anymore.
Palm
'cause
Beach County does.
I think that
Yeah.
they lost the contract, and I'll tell you why.
right.
So I get in to go see this guy, and it's now, I'm there for about an hour or so, and it's now about 5 o'clock, 5:30, and I got more to do with this guy, but my stomach is rumbling. I don't know if I probably didn't have lunch, and I'm hungry. And I said, listen, we need to take a little break. Are there any machines here? Anything I can, you have a cafeteria? Anything I can get some food? And he says, oh, trust me, you don't want to go to the machines. They got Chef Boyardee from when the brand was
The worst
invented.
for the worst food.
Yeah, so I said, you know what? I'm going to go out, and then I'll come back. Let me go out, find a little restaurant nearby, grab something to eat, and then I'll come back. He said, no, you don't need to do that. What do you want? You want ribs? You want
No.
Chinese? What do you want? You want seafood? I said, come on. What do you say? He said, no, seriously. What do you want? You want
This
ribs?
I've never heard. Yeah.
I said, all right, wise guy. I want Tony Roma's ribs. Said, done. He leaves the room. Hand to God. 45 minutes later, I had in front of me Tony Roma.
Wow.
And I said, how is this done? And he said, well, there are guards and there are guards. And we can get anything in here we want.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, is very true throughout the system. Even
they get
till today.
Yeah, and they get.
You don't get the fancy meals anymore.
No.
But for example, prisoners, inmates, whether it's pre-trial or after conviction, after sentencing, they're not supposed to have cell phones inside.
Right, but they all do.
They all do.
They do.
They're getting smuggled in. So how does it happen?
Yeah, I think the guards want to keep the people, their inmates, happy, under control. So it's like a give and take system. Here, I'll get you a cell phone for you. You behave, be good. It occupies their time. I think it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, and also, let's face facts. And I know no disrespect to people who are in that profession, correctional officers, but there are some who are corrupt. Like in anything else.
Well, also because they don't make hardly any money.
They get paid nothing.
And it's one of the worst jobs in the world.
Oh, my God. They really should be paid much better.
Yeah.
It's a hard job.
And it's a hard job. So if an inmate is saying, hey, my buddy on the outside, I'll give you $500, that means a lot to that person.
It's
very tempting.
tempting.
I always am amazed at how much drugs get into the jails. I understand the cell phone. I understand sneaking in some food but it's really remarkable to me, when I hear clients say, "Oh yeah, I saw these guys, smoking marijuana, doing acid." They
I've heard stories about cocaine usage in jail, and then when they get caught, of course, they get severely disciplined.
Right.
And they could even be charged with contraband crimes. I just recently had a situation where a girlfriend of one of my clients went to go visit him, and she had like a little snack for herself.
Oh yeah, that's when we're working on.
Right.
Yeah,
because she has a blood sugar problem, she needs to eat.
No.
And I don't know how it got there. She didn't offer it to him,
Yeah.
which would have been a violation of the rules. But then they wound up searching her. They found it, and then she was banned from visiting.
Blackballed from visiting.
I mean, it's horrible.
It is.
I mean, but the rules are the rules.
Right. They have to stick to them there's
But
zero
sometimes
tolerance.
other crazy stuff happens. I remember I went to visit a client in a women's federal prison in Pleasanton, California. And in fact, it was the client I mentioned earlier who the information was that they were going to break her out of prison.
Oh, okay, sure.
So now she's in a medium security prison and I guess they never proved that information was really accurate because was in medium as opposed to, maximum or high level. So I go to visit her and I walk in and they had like dormitories.
Right.
And I walk into this dormitory, and then there's this big open area, and I see what looks to be a jazzercise class going on. And I see this absolute beautiful woman in leotards, and she's got a boom box, and she's playing, and she's leading the class. She's on a higher level, elevated platform, and she's leading this class of female inmates. She's in leotards. Everybody else is in their normal inmate outfit. And wow, that's interesting. And I go to see my client. As I'm escorted out, passing again, I said to the guard who was escorting me, I said, I'm really curious. What is somebody like that? Does she get paid to come in and do that? He said, no, she's an inmate.
Unbelievable.
She's an inmate. What is she here for? Bank robberies.
No.
So she went from a bank robber to a jazzercise instructor.
Right. But an honest
crazy.
an honest living.
An honest living,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, I'll tell you an experience I had in the jail, which was actually almost life-threatening. Besides the times when I've gone to visit and there's been a lockdown due to a security
Oh,
breach,
that's horrible
and we
when
get
that
stuck in there for hours sometimes, which is really scary. But as you know, a lot of really wealthy clients that get in jail, they'll pay us to come visit them. They don't mind that it's going to cost them hourly because it gets them out of their cell.
Right.
They get to go to the attorney-client room, much more comfortable. There's no prohibition. They can't prohibit an inmate from meeting with their lawyer. So I had one very high-profile client that I'm not going to mention his name, but they kept him in the infirmary because they didn't want him to get picked on in the general population, threatening, people trying to blackmail him for money or autographs or anything. They were afraid people might pick fights with him and so forth. So they always kept him in the infirmary, and he had his own little room there. And there was an attorney-client room near the infirmary. But on one particular occasion, that attorney-client room wasn't available. It was being used. So I met with him in his cell in the infirmary. Well, about 24 hours later, the next morning, actually, I wake up and on the side of my body, I have 3 welts, boils. They look like boils. I call my friend, who's a plastic surgeon, infectious disease expert. I describe it to him, and he says, sounds like you have MRSA. Have you been in the jails recently?
Oh, I've heard about that. Yeah.
It's a skin-eating bacteria that people can die from. It gets underneath your skin. It's a bacteria that then crawls around your body and just eats away at your
How
skin.
you get it?
Well, someone in the infirmary, it turned out, had it, and I somehow must have touched somewhere that that person had been. He said, so I went in to see him. It was a Saturday morning. I was visiting my client every day in the infirmary, and this is Friday afternoon. Saturday morning, I called my friend, the doctor. He says, get in here. I think he meets me at his office, and I went for 6 months. Every day he had to open up the 3 wounds. You clean out the tunneling, because if you don't, then it's just going to keep tunneling.
Oy.
And so he was able to maintain it in a certain area on my right hip. And the only way to kill it is you have to get on an IV. And the problem was they couldn't figure out exactly what type of bacteria it was. It was a rapid eating bacteria of some sort. So the IV they were giving me wasn't working. They kept trying to, grow it in a petri dish and identify the bacteria. It took them several months. They finally identified what type of bacteria it was, were able to give me the IV, and then it finally went away.
Oh, wow. Are you sure you're okay? Because I've been watching The Last of Us, and I'm a little freaked out right now.
I know, right? To stay away from my right hip.
Yeah, really?
It was a really rough about 6 months. It was not
Wow.
pleasant, but I got to thank Dr. Andrew Ress because he picked up on it immediately. Little plug for my good friend, Dr. Ress, great plastic surgeon and infectious disease doctor.
Wow.
It was a horrible
That's scary.
experience.
I often think when I go into jails about the sanitary conditions.
Yeah.
And one of the things they do in jails is they keep them very cold. And part of that reason is to kill germs and bacteria.
Yeah, and body odor, too.
And body odor, too. Yeah, well, we won't get into that. But I have one, it's sort of a jail story that I want to tell that is kind of interesting. And I'm not going to mention where this happened. I'm not going to mention names or anything because I don't want to get anybody into trouble.
Right.
But I really, truly believe that whoever wrote The Shawshank Redemption must have found out about this because this occurred before The Shawshank Redemption. I had a client who was doing time in a federal prison camp. He was an accountant, and he got convicted of some white-collar crimes, and he was
like
doing
in that movie, Andy Duvane or whatever his name was.
And he was doing short time, and so he was in a prison camp. And one of the things that he was on a work detail that every day was driven into the local little town, and they were like a sanitation crew. They'd be sweeping up and cleaning up around the city, performing public works
Right.
for the little town. And where he was particularly assigned was around the sheriff's office. And he started getting friendly because you see every day, and he could have walked off and left, but of course he wasn't going to do that short time. And he was happy to get outside of the camp. So, and there were a bunch of other people, like 8 or 10 other people around this city doing things. And then the bus would come and pick him up at like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock at the end of the day, and he'd go back to the camp. Well, he started getting friendly with some of the, deputy sheriffs, and they started talking, and they found out he was an accountant. And one day, one of the deputy sheriffs asked him a question about something to do with his tax return. And next thing you know, he winds up, sitting and looking at the tax return. He winds up doing the tax return for that deputy.
He might have sold that story to the movies.
The deputy then tells other deputies about my client. And before you know it, my client now is putting the broom away. He's being ushered into the sheriff's department. There's a little desk he's sitting at, and he's doing tax returns for the deputy sheriffs. And then at 5 o'clock, or 4 o'clock, whenever it was, the bus came to pick him up, about 15, 20 minutes before, he carefully leaves, and he's back with his broom and his pail and his shovel, whatever he's doing. And they pick him up. Nobody's the wiser. None of the other inmates. Nobody's the wiser. Just the guys in the sheriff's department. Well, he's doing such a great job that it gets to the sheriff's ear. And instead of being pissed off, the sheriff goes to meet him and talk to him. And next thing you know, he's helping the sheriff with their budget.
Well, yeah.
Because apparently they were having some issues with the city council, and there was some numbers that were off, and they was looking at the budget. And he's working on the budget for the sheriff's department.
This is, I'm glad you prefaced it by saying this was way before Shawshank Redemption, because this is the story of Shawshank, and someone's ripping you off of royalties.
well.
You should be getting royalties for that movie.
Anyway, what happens is, eventually, one day, he gets noted, or he knew actually what his release day was. The time came for him to be released. Right before he says goodbye to everybody, his buddies at the sheriff's department.
They don't want him to go
and
now.
The sheriff said, listen, when you are finally free of your probation and parole, there's a job here for you. Of course, he didn't want to do that. That was that.
Yes.
But it was an amazing story. And it just, what it actually said to me was something more profound than the amusing story. There is so much wasted mind power and manpower in the prisons,
Right.
all right? That people could be put to doing something of value. You identify somebody who is got a talent for something. One of the ways they should pay off their debt to society is doing that for free.
Right.
And participating. There's so much mind power. Our clients, especially the white-collar clients, some of these people are absolutely brilliant.
Right. I had a surgeon who was a brilliant surgeon, Ivy League trained, and he got himself in some trouble, and I proposed to the prosecutor that he'll do 5,000 hours of free surgeries, and as community service, volunteer.
Sure, we need that.
Right. And they didn't even want to hear it. But
No.
There's been other times, too, where I've offered that, for brilliant CEOs that, hey, let them give back by volunteering at nonprofit organizations and getting them back, but they usually falls on deaf ears with prosecutors. But I agree with you.
And part of the reason why, and even sometimes judges, is because ultimately the most important thing, obviously, other than deterring crime and letting people out there know that, if they get caught and they do this crime and they get prosecuted, they're going to go away. It really comes down to it's really punishment.
Yes.
It's really punishment. All the other things they talk about, it's really punishment at the end of the day. Because that example that you gave, Why not turn something into something positive? A need exists out there. You've got the person who can satisfy that need. All right, they got getting paid for it. Why not?
Yeah. The prosecutor will also say, well, just because your client happens to be educated and trained and an expert, what about this guy who didn't have the opportunity to go to school and get educated and hold down a job?
Well, I
Why should they be
understand.
at a disadvantage? So they're, hopefully one day they'll agree
Yeah.
to do
Well,
things like
the
this.
whole sentencing system is a topic in and
Right.
of itself,
Right.
and we're going to be talking about that next.
Yes, we
We're
will.
going to be talking about the Diddy sentencing
Yeah,
coming
we
up.
will. We'll talk about Diddy and as well as the Idaho University student murder case.
Right.
And that sentencing that's coming up pretty soon. Or actually was just sentenced, so we'll talk about our opinion on that. But I wanted to also say that we were talking about like the business of an inmate. It reminded me when I represented Jeff Epstein, he had a big operation. So the short term that he was in jail, we set him up in his own cell. Back then it had a fax machine, had his access to a
No.
computer, had his own personal phone. Because we argued to them that, look, a lot of people, like literally thousands of people will be out of a job. A huge enterprise will collapse if he's not available to do his business. So they set him up a nice little office in his jail
That's wild.
cell. Yeah.
So it was like the American version of Carlos Escobar. Huh?
Yeah, he did all his business from inside.
Wow.
Yeah, but what we're trying to do now is respond to our listeners. Our viewers, our followers, they love these episodes. They're giving us feedback. They wanted to know more about our background, how we got into what we're doing, our personal experiences. So we share that with them, and we're going to continue to listen to them and provide our cases and respond to their interests. And,
Right.
And just keep rocking and rolling with this.
So until our next episode,
Yep. You are free to go. Down Low Investigations is a sponsor of You're Free to Go. Behind every great criminal defense attorney is a great private investigator. That's why Mark and I use Down Low to investigate cases all over the country. Down Low can help you too, whether you're running a background check on an employee or running a background check on a blind date, or let's say you need someone followed or some other type of investigative work conducted. Down Low is the way to go. Call Download Investigations at 561-843-1806. Everything expressed and discussed in this episode are the opinions and experiences of attorneys Guy Fromston and Mark and and their guests. All ethical rules are complied with. Attorney-client privilege and confidential information is not shared or released during these episodes, and names, dates, locations, and other identifying information may be changed to protect confidentiality. Topics are embellished, and none of the statements made constitute legal advice and should not be considered or relied on as such.